Hey everybody, it's really great to be here today. I was at React Day Berlin last year, so it's very cool to see how it has grown and to be on this side of the podium this time. As Yanni said, my name's Monica, and yes, I'm a Berlin local, as much as you can be. And I'm going to be talking about secrets to a successful design system. So let's dive right in. So the first thing we're going to talk about is why. Why do you even maybe want a design system, and what problem is it trying to solve? After that, we're going to be talking about some secrets that I and my team have learned working on a design system over the last 12 months, rolling it out over our major applications. And at the end, we're going to talk about defining success. What does success actually mean for us? So the first thing that you might think when you hear the term design systems is it just hype, or is it actually something that can help me? I don't know about you, but I hear the terms, listed on the screen on Hacker News, Twitter, Medium, whatever, all the time. And I think it can be really difficult to know whether a technology is actually going to solve a problem that you have, or in fact, it's just another hype, right? And I think we also see this today because you hear the next thing that's about to kill Redux, right? I mean, before it was GraphQL, and before that even, it was the stable context API. So how do you even know that when you hear a term like design systems that it's going to do something for you? And the reason that design systems stood out to me is that design systems really solve a real problem. So instead of becoming just a best practice that can quickly become an anti-pattern tomorrow, it solves a pragmatic problem for us, something that I think we all feel, right? Dealing with cross-platform UI, trying to invent a single source of truth across many applications with many teams working on them, design systems solve something that we can all very much relate to. So in order to show you what problem a design system solved for me, I want to show you what my world looked like before we introduced a design system. And it looked a little something like this. So what's really common before you go about building a design system is you do what's called a design audit. And that's where you go into every single application that you have, and you pull out common components, things that you think your new shiny component is going to need to do. And you want to collect all the context and the use cases that that component needs to handle. And in our case, you see we have a ton of buttons, right? And they all have little differences about them, loadings, spinners, notifications, etc. But what I find most striking about this slide is how much time and energy so many designers and developers spent making this wildly inconsistent user interface. You know how it works when you work with a designer, right? If the border radius is like 1 pixel off, they will see that from across the room, and they're going to tell you about it, right? You have to fix that. So you can imagine they labored over this, and they just made it worse. And that, to me, is a tragedy. So design systems are about bringing order to this chaos and fixing inefficiency and inconsistency by creating common components and standards for using them. So you can have something like this instead. One button where it's very clear that's the button that I need to use. And if my use case isn't solved by this button, there's another pattern for it. So we've been working on our own design system for about 12 months now, not just building it, but you can check out the code if you're interested in implementation details on GitHub. But we've also been rolling it out to our 3 major applications, because what's not really talked about enough, I think, is that you don't just build a design system, then you have to use it, right? The beginning is a very small part. So now that you've seen a little bit about what a design system can bring you from and bring you to, I want to give a clear definition. So this comes from the Envision Guide to Design Systems, and it says a design system is a collection of reusable components guided by clear standards that can be assembled together to build any number of applications. It sounds like exactly what a lot of us are looking for. So more concretely, what is inside of a design system? Well, when you start out building a design system, you usually start with your ideas. These are the patterns that users are going to experience in your application, forms, shapes, colors, what identifies your brand, as well as language, tone of voice, the way that you communicate with your user. And those of us in design and development, we create artifacts. Those are the implementations of those designs. And these can take the shape of component library, documentation, tools, and processes for introducing change. And when you combine these ideas and these artifacts together, you have a design system. And this is a place where design ideas and artifacts are able to evolve together over time. And this is something that really fundamentally separates a design system from just a style guide or just a component library. So the reason I want to talk about successful design systems and so-called secrets behind them is because I feel like there's a lot of things being discussed in the design community about how to build design systems, but what about us developers, right? We're doing a significant part of the work, but there's really not a lot of resources about what you do once you're actually building it out in code. And I also really believe that design systems are hard for the same reason that building a product is hard, because design systems are in some ways also a product. And you have the things that comes with products as well. Dealing with documentation, releasing. You have users, right? Just like any other product. You have to deal with change management. There are a lot of things going on here that we need to be mindful of. So today I want to talk about the life cycle of a design system and share with you how we moved through this life cycle and some ways to make the transition easier. So first, you probably start with the idea, right? Maybe this is why you decided to come to this talk. You thought, a design system, that sounds interesting, that sounds like something useful. And from there, you need to go from just having an idea to getting some resources, getting buy-in, maybe from developers, but also from management. How do you do that? From there, you build out a prototype. You need to pick your tech stack and start building things. And after that, you're probably gonna be in production. But your design system won't be perfect yet. So you definitely need to introduce changes, right? How do you do that when you have a running system? And at last, hopefully you reach a state of maturity where the design system meets most of the needs that people have. But you still need to deal with maintenance, right? That pesky software problem that we cannot escape. So I want to walk through these stages and also share with you our learnings going through these stages and how to make them successfully. So you start with an idea, okay? You think, I have those buttons, you know, that those buttons speak to me. We all have our own version of them somewhere. And how do you go about actually getting buy-in to get people to build this? It can be very difficult to do. And the reason for that is I think the value proposition of a design system is not really clear from the business side of things. So I know that lines of code is not the best way to measure value, but it does tell you something about how much time and energy has actually gone into building a piece of software. So you can see we have a web application. It has a lot of lines of code in it, and we have put in a lot of effort, and it delivers directly value to the user. That's what people pay us money for. Then you also have our website. It allows people to learn about our product and helps them make a buying decision. Clearly, it delivers value. But what about a design system? Because you don't have customers that say, you have a really great design system, I'm definitely going to give you money, right? That's just not how it works. So it can be difficult because if you talk to people in management, they might say, well, why don't you just take all that code and put it on top of the web app? You know, why don't you just build the features our users actually are interested in? And so to answer this question, I think it's helpful to put on our business hat and think from the perspective of a CEO. And one way to get into this mindset is by taking a look at a survey which was done by Stripe earlier this year called the Developer Coefficient. And this survey wanted to answer two main questions. What are the challenges that businesses face today, and how can developers help? They asked more than 2,000 CEOs and developers in 6 different countries. The first thing that they asked was, how threatening are the following factors to the success of your business? The number one thing was security and data breaches. And I don't know, this is not so surprising. This is on the news every single day. Who isn't getting hacked these days? And then you have things like regulation, disruption, growing competition. But what I find most interesting, in fact, is what's not on this list. Because what's not on this list is the number one argument that designers and developers tend to make when advocating for a design system. And that's inconsistent user interface. I hate to break it to you, but management in your company is probably not having nightmares about those buttons, right? They might be a little bit bothered, but they don't have nightmares about it. They have nightmares about getting hacked. And so we can't just make this argument because it doesn't clearly speak to the business. So what can we do? The next question that was asked was, how much of an impact can developers have to help your company with each of the following challenges? The number one thing was bringing products to market faster. Okay, let's be serious. We all know that business people want things faster, so that's not exactly a revelation. But the last thing, which I find the most striking, is this one. How much of a priority is it for upper management to increase the productivity of its developers? 96% of all of the CEOs and C-level executives who were asked this question said it was a high or medium priority. That is a really strong consensus across different business sectors, different countries, etc. And this leads me to the first secret that I want to share with you, which I think is maybe a little controversial, but that's what makes it interesting. And that's that design systems are about productivity, fundamentally. They are about amplifying productivity across teams by creating design and technical leverage. Consistency in the user interface is wonderful, right? It makes the UX a lot better, but it's not the driving factor. It's not the thing that brings value to the business. It's just something that you kind of get for free in a really great way. So whether you're thinking about pitching the idea to your boss, or you are building out your design system for users, the developers and designers who work with it every day, think about productivity. So let's imagine that you got buy-in. You made a really great argument, and now they're like, okay, show us how it's done. There are a lot of things that can happen between just having an idea and creating this prototype, right? It can include talking with your design team, maybe doing a design audit. But I want to skip over that and start by talking about your tech stack. So it can be so easy to think that we need to build for the future and imagine what's the web going to look like in 5 years. And goodness knows we have no idea. Don't believe this guy on Twitter who thinks that he knows what's going to be happening in 10 years. So instead of thinking about what the future could possibly look like, I think it's way more helpful to look at the tech stack you already have. So maybe you live in a React utopia where you only ever touch React, but in a company like mine, which has been around for almost 7 years, we have a few things we've picked up along the way. So even if we do our day-to-day in React, it doesn't mean that our entire web surface is written in React. So we have to cover everything with our design system. We can't just say, I pick the convenient parts and I ignore the other ones. That's not how it works. So the next thing that we have to grapple with is that the world is bigger than React. I know it's hard to say at a React conference. Don't throw things at me. But that's the truth, right? You have to plan for this. And there are two main ways that you can do this when you build out your design system. The first thing is called design tokens. You can think of it easily like something that you might have put in a Sass variable back when Sass was the best practice. And now instead you put this in JSON. You make it platform agnostic. So what you can do is then transform all of your colors, your typography, your breakpoints and spacings. You can transform these into a format that can be consumed by other platforms. For example, XML on Android, maybe Sass on the web, or Stylus, or whatever you use. And in that way, you can make these concrete decisions on a subatomic level in your design system. So they're going to be the same everywhere. Besides this, you can also provide a CSS only version of your design system. And this kind of allows you to create a compatibility layer between the wonderful world of React, where you're writing your components, and the not so wonderful world that we all have to deal with. Because unless your company has implemented your own marketing stack and you are doing all your emails all on your own in React, there's a pretty good chance you're going to need something like this. So, okay. By now, we have thought about how to make our design system both platform and framework agnostic. What happens now? What happens once we actually made it to production? Well, the thing about design systems is that, as I said, they're a product. And just like other products, they can also have bugs in them. And, we live in a world of continuous delivery, of, upgrading everything from NPM, no matter if it's malicious or not. It doesn't really matter. And the fact is, it's so easy to have this bug travel very quickly into your other applications and create kind of a network effect. And to give an example of how easy this is, I can share with you one such occurrence from this summer. We had this pull request which seemed very innocent, which said, I want to add the default type button to button, right? Because it was creating some issues. When you think about it, it's basically one line of code. It has some tests. One person reviewed it, very nice. But unfortunately, it didn't quite work out this way, right? This one line of code actually broke some of our forms. Clearly, we were missing some tests on the integration side in the applications itself. But what we learned from this is that when you don't have a type assigned to a button, it defaults to a submit button. Cool. Okay. And what that meant is that we had forms that didn't submit anymore. And you might think semantic versioning, wouldn't that save you? But of course, you still need to know when you're going to introduce a breaking change, right? And this didn't appear to be one. So the thing I think we really need to understand here is that a design system is a dependency in every possible sense of the word. So when you think about upgrading React, for example, I know we trust Facebook a lot, at least their libraries. And let's say that you want to upgrade React. And you're probably going to do a whole lot of testing, right? Because you have made this upgrade. And if you have a non-trivial application, it's super important that everything still works. But when you think about it, a design system is just like a layer that's sitting on top of your React code, right? So if you introduce a bug in a button, a modal, an input field, this can have a ripple effect, not just in one application, but in a number of applications, depending on how you scale. So change management in design systems is not so fundamentally different than working in any other library, but I can share with you a couple of practical learnings. So the first thing goes down to deprecating gradually. Make sure that you're communicating changes that will eventually break, both in code and in docs, so people don't introduce new deprecated code. The next thing, which I think is really critical, is to define and ideally automate the critical path in your apps. So making sure that these are tested on more than one layer. And what's important to realize as well is that if your application is growing all the time and lots of people are working on it, your critical path is pretty likely to change, right? You may have new things that are really important. Maybe a marketing campaign is being run right now and you really need something to be working. So you need an open and ongoing communication about what this entails. And finally, you can take a page from the book of open source. Use canary builds. When you introduce or plan a release candidate for your design system, at any stage, you can put it into an integration environment, let it live there for a while, and if it's not covered by your critical path, there's a good chance that someone is going to notice something's off otherwise. So, all right, we have released to production, awesome, and we are now reaching a point of maturity where we have mostly the components that people need to do their job every day. But as we all know, there will always be bugs, right? It's software, we are humans, we are writing a fallible language like JavaScript. There will be bugs, right? There will be to-dos, things that you didn't get around to, and if you treat the design system like an append-only system, these bugs are just gonna pile up. So this really drives home the point to me that, you know, we all know that the real cost of software development is not the part at the beginning, right? Making the initial design system is just a small piece, but we have to maintain it. So what's really important here is to think about how you're going to organize teams in a way that they're going to scale. So one initial way that you might think about building a team around a design system is to use a service team. And this initially sounds awesome. You have a team, they are 100% dedicated, they are going to fix every bug. Who doesn't want a team like that? I wish I had a service team for me. They would just fix my bugs. But you know, the reality is this doesn't scale, right? You have so many consumers of the design system and it's only going to grow. So that team is ultimately going to become a bottleneck. A better model, which I think a lot of people are adopting, is to use an Innersource model. And it's basically like open source, but maybe your stuff is not open source. But you can apply the same principles. So you have core maintainers, maybe they are officially your design system team, and they are going to be responsible for keeping the quality high, right? Because if you just let everyone add anything they want, well, the chances are you're going to end up with more technical debt than solved problems. And at the same time, you allow contributors to say, hey, I have a bug, I can fix it myself, I can unblock myself. And at the end of the day, this means you have more people working in the system, but you also have a mechanism to make sure that you're not introducing too much technical debt or too many issues. And the point I want to make here is that collaboration is really the key to long-term quality. It might be tempting to say, I made this beautiful system and I don't want anyone to touch it. But gatekeeping is not a way to actually scale, because if you don't meet people's needs in the system, they will find workarounds. We are developers, we are creative people. We will find a way to work around these inefficiencies, right? So making it easy to collaborate and organizing in a scalable way is what's going to create a design system that is actually meeting the needs of its users. So, all right, what have we learned so far? First, that design systems are about productivity. Consistency is really great, but it's not the driving point of value. We also learned that the world is bigger than React, and that there are a few ways we can manage this, whether it's becoming platform agnostic with design tokens or framework agnostic by providing a compatibility layer in CSS. We also learned that design systems are dependencies, just as critical as React is, because if you implement a bug in one place, it can have a ripple effect. So we need to make sure we have a change management strategy for introducing changes to production. And finally, we learned that collaboration is key. Rather than gatekeeping, it's important that you include everyone in the process to reach the quality you're looking for. So at the end, you might be wondering, how am I going to know if I even made a successful design system? What does that mean? And I think the easiest way to find that out is just to ask. Ask the people who are working in the system every day if they think they're doing a good job because of it. So I sat down with my head of design at my company, and we came up with some of our key KPIs, our key performance indicators. What did we want for people to get out of the system? And we honed in on speed, quality, because you need both of them, right? Ease of contribution and completeness. So I just want to share with you the results of our survey very transparently, and also what did we get out of it. So the first thing we asked people was, does it make it actually easier for you to develop something high quality? And we had overwhelmingly positive response, but we also had someone who felt neutral and someone who disagreed. And that's okay. I'm not here to share this graph with you like lots of agreement, pat on the back, right? That's not what it's about. It's about the fact that we have something measurable, right? We can ask this question over and over and see how we are actually improving over time. The same thing goes for speed. Speed is an important part of being productive, right? And measuring speed is notoriously hard. If you ask people to see how fast a software project is going, you know, they look for metrics like lines of code or tickets closed. But we all know that that's nonsense. And instead, we can ask people, how do you feel about the speed that you're delivering things at? And this is important because at the end of the day, design systems are about people, right? We're building this tool so people can do their job better. And if they're able to deliver their code and their product development in a better way because of the system that we created, that means that the system has also been successful in and of itself. So the last thing that I really want to leave you with is this, that it can be really easy to think that we have to make it perfect because the design system is our one chance, right? We made all these terrible things, all these ugly buttons before, and now we have to do it right. And to some degree, this is true. But at the same time, we need to value making progress over just trying to be perfect. Because you can compare yourself to many design systems built by bigger teams with more resources, and first, you're just going to feel bad about yourself because you will maybe never have as many components as them, or your documentation will never be as polished. But does that really matter? I mean, you don't need to have something perfect in order for it to deliver value, because you're in a different context with a different product, different team. You know, you have a different world that you're working in, and you can still make the lives of people who are sitting next to you a lot easier and more productive by building a system that works for you. So I just want to encourage you that if you focus instead on making progress rather than perfection, you're going to be able to get closer to your idea of success every single day. So thanks so much. I really appreciate you listening. And if you want to talk about design systems, I would love to hear your own secrets that you have to share. So just come find me, and thanks so much.